Hey everyone, I'm your host Cadence, and welcome back to another episode of Project Honesty. This is a podcast by young adults, for young adults, to acquire unfiltered advice and bold opinions, as well as take deep dives into the issues shaping our world. We'll challenge ideas, explore new perspectives, and have fun while navigating the ups and downs of life. This is Project Honesty, where truth meets curiosity and every conversation matters. If you haven't already, go check out last week's episode called Memes to Movements. In this episode of Project Honesty, we dive deep into the fascinating intersection of pop culture and politics. From viral moments that spark social change to celebrity influence shaping public policy, we explore how the worlds of entertainment and government collide. Join me as we break down the trends, controversies, and key figures that are reshaping the cultural and political landscape today. If you haven't already, go over to our Instagram, which is project_honesty24. That is where we release every single weekly topic. In today's episode, we're going to be talking about advocacy in theater. We're going to talk about how the performing arts can raise awareness to important social issues, and how advocacy through these arts makes people think beyond the issue. Theater, if you haven't been here since the start of Project Honesty, which, by the way, Project Honesty turns 1 year old in like 2 weeks. Yeah, it turns 1 year old in 2 weeks, which is crazy. The fact that I've been doing this for a year. Anyways, that's not the point. If you haven't been here from the beginning or don't know me personally, I'm an actor. I'm very deeply connected in both the theater and film community, and I really enjoy the art of theater. It's one of my passions that I've found within the last 5 years that has truly shaped me as a person, and it's something that I care about really deeply and something that I try to talk about on here often, but sometimes it doesn't necessarily happen. This is kind of bouncing off of last week's episode where we talked about pop culture, celebrities, how that is closely intertwined with the political landscape, specifically in the US, and also how social media plays a role in that. But today I wanted to talk about theater. I wanted to talk about how this art form, specifically this physical art form, sparks social change. So to start off, the modern theater community, from what I've observed and what's easily observed in many theater settings, it's very inclusive and accepting, and of all different communities. So the LGBTQ plus community, no matter your race, your gender identity, your background, your experience, your goals, it's very, very inclusive. And because of this inclusivity, there's a lot of diversity. So you have the ability to find your people and connect with your people in a way where it's like you get to talk to people that, first of all, you probably wouldn't normally get to talk to or work with, but then also people that understand you on a different level. And that's something that's a really great gift of theater, at least in my eyes. Getting to connect with those people are incredible, and I've met some of my best friends through theater. And another thing that is observed not only in the modern theater community, but especially now, especially in the modern theater community, is pushing for change. There's a lot of advocacy that goes on within the theater community, off stage and on stage, and there's a lot of advocating for those who aren't as fortunate. Many plays and musicals now are used to push a certain message. Shows like Urinetown, an artistically portrayed version of the problems with capitalism and financial greed. We have West Side Story, the effects of racism and poverty on communities. There's also Rent. It explores what it's like in the LGBT plus community during the 1990s AIDS epidemic. Or like A Raisin in the Sun, with struggles of segregation and social class issues, as well as racism. And historically, theater was a white, male-dominated art form. Even going back to Shakespeare, if there was a woman written into the script, it would still be performed by a man. So think of Romeo and Juliet. Juliet was actually a dude. Juliet was not a woman because women weren't allowed to perform. And then once women started being allowed to perform, there was still a lot of exclusivity for people who weren't white or affluent. And so for the longest time, theater was a very exclusive art form for those who could afford it or participate. And the first mainstream breakthrough for people of color was in the early 20th century. The first full-length Broadway performance written and performed by African Americans is called I think it's Indomie by Burt Williams and George Walker. The first Broadway performance with no white people in it. And I think it was really groundbreaking to see that. And that is the initial space that was created for people of color to have a space in this performing art. And the sad thing about it is, so it's only been within the last 150-ish years, almost 200-ish years, that people of color were allowed to perform. This is where the focus of addressing social issues through performing arts began. One of the greatest modern examples of a breakthrough for racial bias is Hamilton. Lin-Manuel Miranda's Hamilton challenges racial bias by making the case that America's history and future are built by people and for people of all races. Its bold casting choices, its innovative storytelling, and the celebration of diversity have made it a cultural touchstone that advances conversations about equity and representation in modern society. If you haven't, go watch Hamilton. Now, I am not the biggest fan of musicals, but I enjoyed Hamilton. I mean, musicals are not my physical art form of choice, but Hamilton is amazing. And one of the first things that was talked about, especially when Hamilton was written by Miranda, but then also seen for the first time by public audiences, is the diverse casting. So despite the majority of these historical characters in the musical being white, technically white, these characters are portrayed by people of different races to show that America was not only built by white men, but also people of color. And that's something that Miranda chose when writing it and casting it, is that, sure, you could have cast Hamilton as an all-white play, but that would be a problem considering the century that we're in and the world that we're in. And it would be extremely harmful and exclusive to people of color and their performing ability. And I think the diverse casting in Hamilton showed the theater community that you do not have to typecast or cast based on race. It's very, anyone can play anyone. You just have to be a good actor. Hamilton also reframes the narrative of the United States founding through a lens that elevates immigrants and minorities and historically marginalized groups. I feel like Hamilton and West Side Story are very similar when it comes to portraying the issue of racial bias in America. But I think Hamilton truly takes that next step in making sure that we are seeing others struggle through a lens that isn't our own. And that I think is something we don't see a lot. We're seeing it more now, but I mean, it's been missing for years. And so that's one thing I really enjoyed about Hamilton and reading articles about Hamilton, was the fact that this is supposed to uplift those who have struggled in the United States for years and have gone through many hoops just to exist. There's also something with the music and production choices when it comes to Hamilton. By blending hip-hop and R&B and other modern musical styles with a historical story, Hamilton connects the struggles of the past to contemporary racial and social justice issues. Hip-hop is not something that you see in musicals or on Broadway for that matter at all. And so it's really cool, especially when you watch Hamilton for the first time, some of the soundtrack is not what you're expecting. And even with hip-hop and R&B not being a historically white genre of music, it further promotes that diversity that Hamilton is. It's breaking the bounds of what we as artists view as typical. And that's something I really also enjoyed seeing while watching Hamilton. And for many audiences, Hamilton serves as a powerful reminder that race and ethnicity should not limit an individual's aspirations and opportunities. As a white actor, I have the privilege of seeing shows like this that uplift those marginalized communities. And it's really powerful and it's really beautiful. And for young performers, it's so critical that they can see themselves in any space. And when they see people of color in a mainstream performance like Hamilton on Broadway, it opens that door for them to imagine themselves there too, which is so important. Because then it gets rid of those limits that are societally put on them from a very young age. But when they see that door open, because of this diverse casting and because of the choices that were made in the creation of Hamilton, it shows them that there are no limits to what they can do as an artist. Hamilton did and still does use its success to advocate for social issues, including support for racial equity initiatives, education programs for underserved communities, and the dialogue about systemic racism. I know that Lin-Manuel Miranda is a very good advocate to look at when it comes to artists of color, and just seeing how the cast of Hamilton and the people involved in Hamilton are really socially aware, and they continue that advocacy that is shown on that stage into their personal lives and really push that message that they perform for all the time. And overall, Hamilton broke stereotypes about what Broadway musicals can look like and sound like, and it paved the way for more inclusive storytelling in theater and other media. So kind of just like Greatest Showman, and how Greatest Showman was a musical, I think it was like 2016? I don't remember. But how Greatest Showman was very racially diverse in their casting and also just diverse in general. Hamilton also did the same thing, but for the theater community and not necessarily the film community, and it's something that was so incredibly groundbreaking and powerful to witness and experience. And I think Hamilton has an influence on how modern playwrights choose to write and cast their shows because of how diverse and inclusive this show was. Now I want to talk about how addressing social issues through the performing arts can help audiences think beyond the issue. Addressing social issues through the performing arts can be transformative for audiences, not only by raising this awareness, but also by encouraging deeper reflection and action. One of the biggest things that the performing arts does for advocacy is the emotional connection. So you're bridging that gap of empathy and understanding and really engaging the heart of the audience. Performances create this emotional space, allowing audiences to experience the struggles and the hopes and the dreams of others. And this humanizes abstract social issues and fosters empathy within that audience. And just like I talked about in Hamilton, there's a lot of reframing the narrative in modern theater, offering fresh perspectives, and the performing arts often presents issues through unique lenses, and it challenges preconceived notions and stereotypes about certain communities. It also sparks critical thinking. It encourages questioning these social issues that are being portrayed, and art provokes audiences to analyze these systems and ideologies and cultural norms, really find the underlying social issues, prompting that deeper inquiry into the causes and solutions for these issues. Another thing that I really love, and it is very specific to theater, is creating that safe space for dialogue and facilitating conversations. Live performances provide a shared experience, breaking down barriers to discussions on sensitive topics. And one thing that I really appreciate about theater is post-show discussions or community events that extend that conversation of the story that was put on stage. I've been to a few shows where there's a post-show discussion, and it's basically you watch the show and then there's a Q&A after, and you can ask the actors anything. And I think that is one thing you don't get with film or social media or anything. It's one thing that's very specific to live performance, is being able to ask those questions, because as an audience you sit there and you do have questions nearing the end of a show, and getting the opportunity to ask those is so incredibly powerful, and it's something that inspires personal action. Moving beyond that awareness, the performing arts can inspire individuals to take action, whether that's volunteering, advocating, fundraising, or changing their personal behavior. It really makes your audience choose what their next move is and how they decide to go about a social issue that may or may not involve them. Performing arts can engage the heart and the mind, creating a visceral experience that helps audiences move beyond surface level understanding of social issues. By connecting emotionally and intellectually and imaginatively, the arts empower individuals to reflect on their role in creating a more equitable and compassionate world. Feel free to drop your favorite play or musical down below, and you can include the message behind it. One of them right now, I'm going to say Urinetown. It's a show that my school put on a year ago, almost a year ago. But I really enjoyed Urinetown. It's probably one of my favorite musicals out of all the musicals that I don't like. Urinetown is definitely at the top. Its funny name is, Urinetown, ha ha ha. But I really enjoyed Urinetown because there's a lot of humor, but also a great mix of seriousness when it comes to talking about capitalism. I remember a lot of the actors who are my friends, when describing Urinetown to me, said it's about capitalism and pee. So if there's any local Urinetown performances near you, I recommend going to check it out because it's really amazing. Thank you so much for listening to another episode of Project Honesty. You can check us out on social media. Our Instagram is project_honesty24. Our TikTok is project.honesty. Our website is linked in our Instagram bio, and we are always available for listening on Spotify and YouTube. If you enjoy listening to Project Honesty, share us with friends and family, and you can direct them to the Spotify, YouTube, Instagram, website, or TikTok to help them learn more. Subscribe, follow, and click the bell icon for updates when I post, and remember, the more listeners, the bigger the family.